The Dallas Stars have had one of the best off seasons across the NHL, and they are poised to be one of the best teams in the league next season. And on today's episode, I give you some of my way too early hot take predictions for the Stars for the 23-24 season. We'll talk about some guys I expect to have some big bounce back seasons and guys that I expect to jump into leading roles on the team. All of this coming up on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, coming to you on this Monday, July 10th. And whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for stopping by and making Locked On Stars your first listen every single day. Be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, follow along on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. We are always free and available no matter where or how you choose to listen. Thank you to each and every one of the everydayers out there for continuing to make us a part of your daily routine, even here in the off season, which, I mean, it feels like we're getting relatively close to the start of the regular season. A lot of big off season items have been checked off the list. The draft, the big free agency moves for the most part have been made. We might still see a few signings across the league. A lot of trades have been made. Development camp has come and gone. And so now it's really just the waiting game for training camp to start up at the end of the summer and the beginning of the fall. And then, that's when things really start to kick into high gear and we start to get very excited about the return of NHL hockey to our lives. But I want to go ahead and get the hype train started for some players on this Dallas Stars team and go through some thoughts that I had just, whether it be just throughout my day or, things that just come to me naturally as I find myself thinking about this team quite often, as I'm sure many of you do as well. And I thought I'd share some just way too early, middle of the summer, bold predictions for next season, some hot takes, whatever you want to call them. And these are ones that I think are pretty interesting and they are pretty bold, some of them more than others, but I didn't want to just say bold predictions and then just say, oh, Jason Robertson will score 115 points. Because, I mean, while that's, I think, a fair prediction, it's not necessarily bold. So I'd want to throw some bold ones your way, but even though they might seem a little bit outlandish, I think that there is some realism to all of these. So I'm curious to know your thoughts as well. If you're watching on YouTube, let me know what you think of these bold predictions, and then let me know your own bold predictions. I'm sure that there's some that I haven't even thought of that many of you probably have come to mind. But let's go ahead and get started with the first bold prediction of the episode, and it has to do with Mason Marchment. And this might be the boldest of the three that I have. I'm starting out hot and heavy on today's episode. I think Mason Marchment will finish the regular season with 25 plus goals. Now, I know it's no secret that Mason Marchment had a disappointing debut season in Dallas last year, but it seems like the decision has been made, unless there's some crazy trade on the horizon, that the Stars are content to hold on to him for at least one more season. I think it makes sense. One season is a relatively small sample size for his deal. After this upcoming season, he'll be halfway through his contract with the Dallas Stars. And if it's another disappointing season where there's, flashes of potential, but ultimately not a ton of production from Mason Marchment, then you probably start the discussion of maybe moving on from him as a player on the team. But I imagine, I'm 99% certain that we will see Mason Marchment suit up for the Dallas Stars on opening night as a member of the opening night roster. And I think that there were some reasons that factored into Marchment's lack of production and some reasons that I think that he'll be a little bit better this coming season. For starters, it was really, when you think about it, his first full season in the NHL. He had a brief 4 or 5 game stint in Toronto, and then his first full, I'm doing air quotes here, real season, debut was the condensed COVID season with the Florida Panthers. And then even, 2 seasons ago where he kind of had his quote unquote breakout year with, 47 points or what have you. Even then, I think it was a 54 game season. It wasn't even, a full season of work. And 68 games, which is what he played in 22-23, also not a full season of work. But if he hadn't dealt with some injuries, especially with some down the stretch of the regular season, I think he probably would have seen all 82 games. And, this is the closest he's gotten to a full NHL workload. And even though he's not a young player by age, I think that there's still something to be said of him getting acclimated to that full NHL workload, the grind of a full nearly 82 game season in a pretty rough division with teams like Colorado, Minnesota, and just in general, embracing the travel and just playing as physical and as emotional as he does. It was a lot to take on. And I think sometimes that was to his benefit. And sometimes I think that he fell a little bit behind. But now I think he has that full season behind him. And hopefully he can get a little bit more health on his side and be a little bit more well adjusted to what a full NHL season might look like. But the big reason that I think that he's more set up for success is because of the guys who he will likely be playing alongside. I think there's great potential for Mason Marchment next season, especially if he finds himself playing alongside Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene, which I believe he will to start the season. I know that there are people out there who think that maybe Logan Stankoven could sneak onto that line, and it certainly could happen, but I don't necessarily see that line being formed on opening night. Maybe we get to a place somewhere in the season where that does happen, but maybe Logan Stankoven cracks the roster, but I think that maybe he finds himself somewhere possibly on a fourth line, but we also might not see Stankoven on the opening night roster. But let's just say we get Tyler Seguin, Matt Duchene, and Mason Marchment all on one line on opening night, and we see them play alongside each other for the majority of the season. I think that having a line with Seguin and Duchene will draw the eyes of the defense towards those two respective players, whether it's 5-on-5 or on the power play. And I think that that could open up some opportunities for Mason Marchment to score plenty of goals. And I think Seguin and Duchene are going to get their fair share of goals as well, because they're both pretty talented players. And even though Seguin hasn't been quite the goal scorer we would like him to be over the past few seasons, I still think he'll get his looks here and there. But I think that, just because it's Tyler Seguin, he's always going to draw the eye of the defense. And then Duchene has been a pretty good player in Nashville over the past couple of seasons. I think he's also going to draw the eyes of the defense too. And that could leave some opportunities on the table for Mason Marchment to execute if he's able to bury his shots and if he's able to take advantage of those potential defensive lapses, especially at 5-on-5. I feel like with some of the new additions and some other players stepping up that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the episode, I don't know if Mason Marchment quite makes the cut for a power play unit, but if he does find his way on there, I think that he could still also find himself in some advantageous situations to get some opportunities to score some goals. His blend of size and speed make him such a unique weapon, and I think that we saw some of that potential in bunches last season. I feel like it was too far and in between at times, and there was that very long stretch where he went without a goal. And I know that as the season went on, a lot of fans started to complain more and more about the lack of production for a guy who was making $4.5 million a season. But I think that one season isn't fair to, explain the whole player's career. And he had he's had to work his way to where he's at now, not the most traditional path to the NHL for Mason Marchment. And I know that there is a good player somewhere within the way that he plays the game and just his passion for the game. And I think playing alongside Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene will benefit him if those three can stay healthy and stay connected on that line and build that chemistry over, training camp and preseason games. We know Seguin and Marchment already have some chemistry from playing alongside one another. And Seguin and Duchene, we found out recently, go back pretty far to playing, kind of hanging out, getting together in the Toronto area when they were a lot younger, getting to know one another. So there's already some chemistry established there. I'm not saying that line is going to be as good as, the Hintz line or maybe even the Johnston, Ben, Donoff line. But if we can find a way to get that line productive, the Stars are going to be an incredibly difficult team to stop. And I think the key is to open up the offensive game for Mason Marchment. It's going to be much easier said than done, but I'm confident that Mason Marchment is going to have a bounce back season and score 25 plus goals. You wanted bold predictions? That is a bold prediction for you. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $2,000. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend on betting everything from the money line to over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. For all the everydayers out there continuing to make our podcast a part of your daily routine, a sincere thank you from the bottom of my heart, continuing to tune in as we continue on with this episode of bold predictions, hot takes for the upcoming season. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, to let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on my bold predictions and give me some of yours as well. Curious to know what the people out there, the Stars fans of the world, think could happen with this team this upcoming season. I think it's going to be a very fun season with a lot of the players on the roster, a team that is better than they were at the end of their playoff run back in the early stages of the summer. They've made some good moves, and I still think that there is some work to be done, whether now before the season starts or maybe even during the season at the trade deadline. But there's one player who I think is due for a huge season, and that's Thomas Harley, who has now emerged as one of the shiny new toys for the Dallas Stars blue line after a great run through the first 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. He played in that series against Vegas, but definitely slowed down a little bit. But in that Minnesota and especially Seattle Kraken series, Thomas Harley was spectacular. 9 points in 19 games in the postseason, all at 21 years old. I think that he's ready to establish himself as a full-time NHLer and a game changer for the Dallas Stars as he's ready to take that next step in his career to being no longer a member of the prospect system. No more is Thomas Harley, everyone's favorite prospect or the #1 favorite prospect, because he is now done being a prospect, ready to take that jump to the NHL and not just get to the roster, but to make a difference on that team. Of course, Miro Heiskanen will still be the star of the show, doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but I think that Thomas Harley will likely be one of the most notable second defensemen in the NHL. And my bold prediction for Thomas Harley this upcoming season is that he will finish the season with at least 50 points. Only 2 players scored exactly 50 points last season, Justin Falk and Devon Toews. And especially you look at Devon Toews, a good defenseman, not the #1 defenseman on his team last year in Colorado. Cale Makar was the premier guy there, yet they still had a guy in Devon Toews who was able to get 50 points. And I expect Thomas Harley to embrace that type of role this upcoming season. I expect him to be an incredibly productive player, while not necessarily being, the main go-to guy defensively, without the spotlight on him all the time. But, Devon Toews, really ever since the emergence of Cale Makar, hasn't been a bad player. I feel like he's just forgotten at times, but then you watch your team play against Colorado, or you just watch a game with Colorado, and then you kind of get reminded that Devon Toews is a pretty solid player, especially a couple seasons ago when they won the Stanley Cup. I know people wanted to talk about Makar. He won the Conn Smythe. He was a huge reason for their success. But the defensive depth also, you have to give a nod to that as well. And I think Harley will fill that role for the Dallas Stars with excellence this upcoming season. And I think there's a lot to like with Harley at 5-on-5, but I think a good chunk of his points could come on the power play. We're going to be talking about the power play a lot here in this segment and in the next one as well, with our final player, who I have a bold prediction for. But Thomas Harley and Nils Lundkvist, I feel like it's not necessarily a secret. A lot of people are speculating, and I feel like it's even been discussed to some extent, just based on what I've been able to find from Jim Nill press conferences, that you would expect Thomas Harley and Nils Lundkvist to do some of the lifting on the second power play unit for the Stars. We'll probably get a better picture of who would be the main guy during training camp and during the preseason, but obviously Miro Heiskanen is going to be the defenseman on the first power play unit, and then either Harley or Lundkvist will probably be taking the responsibility from Ryan Suter, to the chagrin of countless Dallas Stars fans, including myself. I think both of those guys would be great options, especially Harley. If I were to guess right now, I think Harley probably gets more of the green light to play on the Stars' second power play unit, even though they're probably equal in experience. Neither of them have a ton of NHL games played. Lundqvist probably has more. I think Harley, just with his size and skill set, is probably a little bit more qualified at this current juncture to lead the second power play unit, which is looking to be much improved over last season. The Stars had a great power play, but the majority of their goals came from that top unit, which featured the top line, Miro Heiskanen and Jamie Benn, where the second unit was very hit or miss. They were either, scoring a goal or they weren't very effective for about the 60 seconds that they would get on the ice. And I think with some retooling, you put Harley in the defensive spot, you slide in Matt Duchene on that group. And Tyler Sagan's probably there. Wyatt Johnston's probably there. Maybe still Mason Marchment. Just depends on who the Stars are looking to add to that lineup. I think that it could be a very deadly unit, equally as deadly, if not maybe even more so in some ways than the top unit. And Thomas Harley, I think, is ready for that responsibility where, there's not going to be a ton of pressure for him going into the regular season. I know that he had some regular season experience before this past playoff run, but he wasn't getting as many minutes as you would expect him to get now. He wasn't, getting forced out there a ton. It was more just kind of like, well, we need someone to go out there and let's just throw him out there for a handful of games, see how he does. But now, he's played in some of the more meaningful games of an NHL season in the first 3 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think that now, really no situation is going to be too daunting or too intimidating for him. And he'll just be able to ease into the regular season without too much need for adjustment or acclimation. And he can just do what he does well, and that's play the game of hockey on both sides of the ice. And he took a kind of a long road to get here, getting drafted by the Stars in 2019 and finally kind of establishing himself as a full-time NHLer here in 2023. But I think this could be a very special season for Thomas Harley, where he can build a firm foundation for what is hopefully a long and successful career as an NHL defenseman. So Thomas Harley, 50-plus points on the season. You heard it here first. Third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars, our final bold prediction of the day, Wyatt Johnston. Wyatt Johnston is one of the up-and-coming young all-stars in this league. Another incredible young player within the Dallas Stars system. A phenomenal rookie campaign where he finished 5th on the Dallas Stars in goals. An outstanding rookie season, one of the best rookie seasons we've seen for this organization. But I think Johnston is going to take a big step next season and be an even more effective player, similar to what we saw Jason Robertson do, jumping from his freshman campaign, rookie campaign, to a 41-goal sophomore campaign. I think Wyatt Johnston is going to be one of the deadliest offensive weapons in the Stars' arsenal. And my bold prediction for him in the 23-24 season is that Wyatt Johnston will finish top 3 on the Dallas Stars roster in goals next season. I think that Jason Robertson and Roope Hintz are probably going to be the only ones that finish with more goals than him. And a big part of it is going to be playing alongside Jamie Benn, who was one of the best goal scorers on the Stars this past season. But a lot of the times when Benn was out there on the ice with Johnston, he was more of a pass first kind of player, and Benn racked up plenty of his goals on the power play where he wasn't playing alongside Wyatt Johnston. But I think 5-on-5, Johnston is going to open up his game a lot more now that he's played a full NHL season and has gotten that under his belt. He's going to be a lot more comfortable, which is saying a lot because he looked incredibly comfortable out there on the ice, even from his very first game on opening night in Nashville. But I think that it's almost going to be similar to what we saw maybe in the NBA a few years ago. For those of you that follow the Dallas Mavericks, Luka Doncic, rookie of the year in his rookie season, he was phenomenal. And then in his second season, he was also phenomenal and was up for most improved player, which was odd because normally you would associate that with a player who was bad to good, but it was really more a testament to how good Luka Doncic was in progressing his game. And I expect a similar path for Wyatt Johnston this upcoming season. His rookie season was not a disappointment at all. It was a roaring success, but I think that he is going to be so much better in his sophomore campaign because he's going to feel even more comfortable. He's going to be even more confident. He now has a full season and postseason of NHL experience where he looked confident there. He was, the reason for the Stars moving on to the Western Conference Final with that ridiculous play in Game 7 of Round 2 against the Seattle Kraken. There is just so much to like about this kid. And we've seen so many Dallas Stars players go from pretty good to solid rookie seasons to taking a huge leap in their second season. And I think Wyatt Johnston is going to be the next player to do that. I think Jamie Benn, who's kind of adopted this pass first mentality out there on the ice at 5-on-5, is going to be feeding him the puck as often as possible. Evgeny Dodonov probably going to be looking to do the same. And similar to Thomas Harley, I think that Wyatt Johnston, it's pretty safe to assume, is going to see his fair share of power play minutes, probably somewhere on the second unit. And he and Harley can probably connect quite a bit to score plenty of goals with one another. We know that Wyatt Johnston has been playing with Jamie Benn, learning from him, and living for the past year with, one of the Stars' leaders in Joe Pavelski, who's one of the best net front scorers the game has seen. And even though Johnston maybe doesn't have the frame or build of Joe Pavelski, I think that he's probably learned and taken a few things from his game, and we'll probably start to see those get implemented more and more as his career continues to go on. And that includes this upcoming season. I expect Wyatt Johnston to be an absolute offensive force. And when you're talking about players I'm most excited to watch this upcoming season, he's at the top of my list. Just in terms of the potential. And I know even all last year, I mean, it was just, this guy's a steal. How did this guy fall to the Stars that late in the first round of the 2021 NHL draft? And I think that he is going to continue to build upon that, because everything you read or watch about this kid, it just tells you how hard of a worker he is. There's a humility to him where, a confident humility where he knows that there's still work to be done, but he also is confident in his game and he knows what he's capable of. And he goes out there night in and night out, and he just puts on an absolute show. So Wyatt Johnston is going to finish top 3 on the Dallas Stars roster in goals this upcoming season. And I personally cannot wait to watch that happen. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, let me know your bold predictions for the Dallas Stars this upcoming season in the comment section down below. Excited to see what you guys think this team is capable of this upcoming season. Be sure to subscribe to the show, whether on your favorite podcasting platform or on YouTube. We are always free and available no matter where or how you choose to listen to the show. We'll be back here all throughout this week with more episodes updating you on anything that comes up with a signing or a trade or an extension for a guy like Ty Delanger. We'll be covering it all here at Locked On Stars. So I hope you guys enjoy your Monday, and we will see you back here tomorrow.